Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal.
And I'm thinking as I'm sitting here now, well, maybe this is my big break. This is my big chance, you know what I mean?
You don't just walk on to a network show without experience. Now, I know it's an old hackneyed expression, but it happens to be the truth. You got to start at the bottom.
I know, that's where I am, at the bottom.
That's a perfect place to start.
So will you please give your warmest greetings to the newest king of comedy, Rupert Pupkin.
His name is Rupert Pupkin. He lives in a world of make-believe.
Jerry, I love this guy. Always coming up with these great lines. I love him.
Nobody can remember his name.
Mr. Pipkin. Mr. Pupnik.
Mr. Puffer.
Rupert.
Pupkin, P-U-P-K-I-N.
But by 11:30 tonight, the whole world will know that Rupert Pupkin is the new king of comedy. Robert De Niro, Jerry Lewis, in a Martin Scorsese picture. The king of comedy.
We're open. Welcome once again. I am your host, Jerry Dean Roberts, of ArmchairCinema.com, and also ArmchairOscars.com. And as always, seated across the country from me is my co-host, the critic and film historian for TalkMovieMe.com, and the new king of comedy. Here's Doug.
You know, it's better to be a king for a night than a schmuck for a lifetime.
Sage advice. Brilliant advice. We are, of course, talking about the king of comedy.
Mom!
What?
I love this movie.
Very nervous comedy.
Yes.
It's not a movie where you go in. It's one of the only two comedies that Scorsese ever made. The other's After Hours.
Yes, just before
a really
this.
Uncomfortable movie.
It is, and when I first started watching it again, this is like the third or fourth time I've seen it when preparing for this, but I looked at the back of the DVD. I've owned it for years and have watched it a number of times, and it said it was rated PG, and I was like, really? And then as I'm watching it, I'm like, there really isn't very much swearing in this at all. Like, the end is terrifying, and that would have probably gotten it a PG-13 had the rating existed in 1983.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of violence.
No, it's just the kidnapping and the concept of the violence. There's not any really much overt violence. And the Sandra Bernhard talking about, yeah, like the running around in her underpants and stuff like that. That might have pulled it to a PG-13 if it had existed, but it was just G, PG, and R at this point.
Right. This is 1983.
So I was really kind of surprised. I was like, oh, hey, I could probably watch this with my 13-year-old. And then it moved on, and I was like, oh, wait, no. Now I remember why I can't watch this with him.
Okay. Here's where I am with King of Comedy. I've seen this movie 6 times in my life because I have made a pilgrimage to see every Scorsese film ever made. Even Who's That Knocking at My Door, which is terrible.
It's not that bad.
That and Boxcar Bertha, I guess.
It's better than Boxcar Bertha, I will say that.
But I made a trek when I was really getting into film to see every Scorsese film, including this one. I've seen it 6 times in my life, and every single time that I ever see this movie, I always come away with the same reaction. It is an hour and 48 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
When this movie is over, I am sick to death of the sound of my own name. Every single scene that Robert De Niro is in,
Jerry,
he says Jerry at least 10 times. There's not a scene in this movie where he doesn't. maybe the monologue.
The monologue, I don't think he says it, but yeah,
But every
it's
single they must say the word Jerry at least 500 times in this movie. Never
it's
been so sick of
J-
hearing my own name.
the name Jerry is used so much that it's comparable to the F word in Goodfellas.
It is. It really is. That's this movie's F word.
Right.
I love my name, but you hear it so many times. I love mashed potatoes too, but I don't. I don't want them all the time. It's like, and
Sometimes
I
you got to
noticed
take the
that.
cigar out of your mouth. Yeah.
Yeah, but when I watched this film, I thought of that last night, and of course, having that name, it hits you. I guess it hits me harder, you know, and it's just strange. It's like I clued in when I was watching this the other night at just exactly how many times De Niro says that.
It's a lot.
It's like every sentence is peppered with Jerry, 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 Jerry,
And
Jerry.
then add to that the amount of times that Sandra Bernhard says it, and the amount of times that it's said in
My hangers on.
Langford's work area,
Yeah.
and yeah, all of that. So it's it's
It's
very
yeah.
Jerry centric.
In that way, again, this is a very unsettling film.
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely unsettling. There are
Yeah.
scenes where you're sitting there and you're like, ugh, just like. I guess we should start at the beginning. This is the first film that Scorsese made after Raging Bull, and I think the next film he was going to make was The Last Temptation of Christ.
Yeah, and that fell through.
I think Warner Brothers kind of got cold feet and they pulled it because of protests.
Mm-hmm.
And he was going to cast De Niro as Jesus. Which I don't know. I love De Niro, but I don't know if that would work. But he he said, "I don't want to work with you again unless we do something a little lighter, maybe a comedy."
Mm-hmm.
So De Niro brought this script to him. This was written in the 1970s,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very apt for the time.
Very much so.
Because this was 3 years after Mark David Chapman murdered John Lennon,
Mm-hmm.
and I think 2 years after the attempt on President Reagan's life
Mm-hmm.
for Jodie Foster.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was very apt for the moment. It's more apt now.
It is. It's only gained in timeliness over the years, and it really it's the logical extension of the no don't work for it television celebrity.
Instant fame.
Yeah, and I was just watching Step last night, the documentary about this school in Baltimore. It's young women's leadership school in Baltimore.
It's a very good film.
It is very good. It's very good, and one of the girls are talking at one point, and she says, "Well, I don't want to. I'm going to work hard for this. Nobody becomes famous for not doing anything, or nobody becomes good at something for not doing anything." And somebody says, "Kim Kardashian." She goes, "Kim Kardashian is just beautiful. She doesn't. She never made anything of herself." And that's what Jerry's trying to do. He's trying to make something of himself without working.
The late 20th century bred a piece of American culture that I find fascinating. People like Monica Lewinsky, or Paris Hilton, or Kim Kardashian, people who became famous for doing basically nothing.
Yeah.
They haven't done anything to earn what they've done. They've just become celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
And we've also gotten, now this is a 21st century thing, we've now gotten into the trending celebrity.
Right.
The person who becomes famous without a lot of, without almost nothing in it, but
Right. Like
they're
when I
famous
when
for
I
free.
when I hear somebody introduced as YouTube star, I'm like, ah.
Yeah, like the Star Wars.
Yeah,
You know, the
yeah.
Star Wars kid.
Uh-huh.
You know, you become famous, literally become famous for 15 minutes.
Uh-huh.
And that Andy Warhol thing, you know,
Mm-hmm.
everyone in the future, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes.
Everybody gets their 15 minutes of fame. That always reminded me of well, not always, but since I saw it, I think it was in the second season of The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt when Titus gets internet famous, and the guy that does the opening theme for it was like a big thing in the first season. He's like, "Look, let me tell you, the internet fame is fleeting," and Titus is like, "No, no, no, the internet is forever, and so is my fame." And like, and then
No,
like
no, no.
2 days later, nobody knew who he was.
Yeah, yeah. You know,
Eh, eh,
somebody will become famous for just being silly. You know, like the Numa Numa kid. Remember that? Then he tried to duplicate it and it didn't work. And it's
Right,
like
right.
everybody's like, oh, there you go. Everybody remembers him, but it's like, you know, for what?
Mm-hmm.
It's like he could never duplicate that success. And what's interesting to me, and we'll get into the story here. Basically, we're following this sort of schlub. His name is Rupert Pupkin,
The
which, by
biggest
the way,
schlub in movie history, and that includes every character Woody Allen ever played.
right, exactly. Well, he plays this schlub who lives in his mom's basement and carries on conversation. Apparently, has no other ties except for this one woman who's an autograph hound. She's just or sexual terrorist, as Martin Scorsese calls it.
Yeah.
He just seems to live in this bubble where there are no immediate real friends at all. He spends
Right.
a lot of time alone. And what's interesting is he's trying to get fame without working for it.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting to me is he's got talent,
Mm-hmm.
but he doesn't want to work for it.
Right.
And he's doing it by leeching onto this talk show host,
Mm-hmm.
leeching onto Jerry Langford,
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Lewis character. And he doesn't want to work for Jerry. He wants to be Jerry.
Right. It's an obsessive compulsive kind of a situation where he's literally trying to get in good with it. He's trying to all about Eve him.
Mm-hmm.
Just show up and start to get stuff, and then be more famous.
Yeah, like Ann Baxter did in that.
Right.
Betty Davis. The younger, faster, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't want to work for it. And he keeps returning to Jerry's office. The key scene for me is when he goes, the two meetings he has with Shelley Hack. Plays, is it his assistant or secretary? I can't remember. But she...
In 1983, it was probably secretary. Now it would be assistant.
but she's very polite,
Mm-hmm.
but very businesslike. And she says, you know, you have a tape, and he hands it to her. And the dialogue in that scene is great because he has this way of not knowing where the borders are. And that's a through line to this whole movie.
Oh, yeah.
He has a way of not really understanding where the borders are.
Right,
not really
right.
understanding where the filters are.
We'll listen to it, and we'll get back to you when he has a spare moment.
Yeah. When will that
When
be?
will that be? Like,
Yeah.
like they
And he
don't
does-
have anything else going on but to listen to his tape.
Right. Which, if you hear how he records that tape, it's... yeah. He records it by introducing it to Jerry, and then records it like it's
Like he's on the show.
like he's on a show. You can't just do material.
Right.
And But he, when he goes back the next day, because she says something about
Come
you
back
won't
at
be able to get to
4:30.
it today, maybe tomorrow, or possibly Monday. And he goes back the next day, and she tells him, I don't even know if anybody listened to the tape. I don't know if anybody listened.
That's true.
She's probably just telling him that to just, it's the same.
That's probably something that they tell most people that submit material. It's like, you have potential, get back to us. You're not quite ready yet, but we'll keep you in mind. Call us when you're working more, when you've gotten your material better.
And she is encouraging.
Yeah.
She is encouraging.
But that's not what he wanted to hear.
It's not what he wanted to hear. But she is encouraging, and she does give him some advice. It's like, basically, go try out some clubs, build up your act, get comfortable, get some experience, then come back and then come back, and we'll send somebody out to see you.
Because we're serious about this. Like she said, some of the material was really good. I think maybe she did listen to it.
Yeah, that's true. But most of it could probably be just the same boilerplate.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because he just got in Jerry's limo.
Mm-hmm.
He just barged into his limo one night, and he was just like, it was like he couldn't. And then later on, he says, "I said that to get rid of you."
Yeah.
So Jerry tells it. He barges into his house. He tells him, "I did it to get rid of you." And
if I hadn't said it, we would still be standing on the steps outside my apartment.
By the way, I love that scene. It's like, you want to see my pride and joy?
Yeah.
And from a picture of the soap bottles. That's very good.
That's a good visual. I mean,
by the way, that was a very good joke.
Yeah, it was. It was.
But anyway, it's this thing where the advice she gives him is a very sound advice.
Mm-hmm.
Go try it out. If you and I are critics, and we go, send our material out to outlets, and they say, well, it's very good, work on it a little bit. Well, I would work on it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And send it, wait 6 months, send it back, try again. But he doesn't want that. That's not what he wants. He wants it now.
Right.
And he doesn't seem to understand why he can't have it now.
Because he thinks he's good, and that just having that talent is enough to warrant fame and stardom. And it's like, yeah, it's like, I think I'm good, put me on your show, and you'll see. It's like, that's not how that works. It's a supreme ignorance of how show business actually works.
Right. Or not, or just not caring about the process.
Yeah, not even finding out.
Because what I love about the scene when he goes back is the way Scorsese builds it. It's the most uncomfortable thing because it keeps going to another level.
Yeah.
Because he says, she gives him the good advice, and then he gets indignant and he says, "Do you speak for Jerry?" It's like, who the hell are you?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, she says, work on it.
Yeah. She's like, yes, I speak for him. He trusts my judgment. He goes, well, I don't.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
Who are you?
Who are you?
She works in the industry. You're a schlub who lives in your mother's basement. Why do you think you know better than her?
Either she works in the industry or she's just a professional at knowing how to get rid of jackasses like this.
Well, I mean, he has no concept of anything outside of this show.
Yeah. He doesn't seem to have any concept of any other celebrity.
Mm-mm. I mean, he has those that autograph book.
Mm-hmm.
That he got Marilyn Monroe's autograph when she was in New York doing the final press tour for the during a press tour for the Misfits, and uh, all these other things, and then it's he's an autograph hound, but for whatever reason, probably because he actually walks through the street and communicates with people, and he's local, and he can get in to see him often, he's latched on to this talk show host, this nationally televised but locally based for him in New York City personality.
Which is, let's face it, it's the Tonight Show.
Yeah, it is.
Jerry Langford is basically Johnny Carson.
The funny thing is, if you when you were watching the deleted scene with his full extended monologue,
which is terrible.
I think it's funny, but
terrible.
At the end of it, the band is playing a very slowed down version of Johnny Carson's Tonight Show theme.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, if you listen to it, it's a very slowed down version of ba-dum bum ba-dum ba-dum bum ba-da-da-dum. It's very slowed down, but it is that. Is like this oral cue that they cut.
But his monologue, it's I rarely ever heard Johnny Carson come out and tell a joke like, woman goes into the, gynecologist or something like that, or any of that. He never seemed to tell jokes like that. It was always observational humor. The jokes that he tells in this are literally that. A nun goes to the doctor or something like that. And it feels awkward for a talk show.
It's actually it harkens back to older monologues from back in the 50s and 60s, back when the talk show circuit was really starting in television. That was what the jokes were. That was how they did it. That's what stand-up comedy was back then. Before people like Woody Allen or Bill Cosby or anybody who started to revolutionize by telling these weird stories or stories from their life. It was just it was just that. It was like in Annie Hall when Woody's trying to write for the talk show host, and he says, just write. Can you write me a bit like this? A guy goes to Canada, to Quebec, and he goes fishing, and the only French you need to know is Jeanne d'Arc, and that means the lights out in the bathroom, and he goes on with this big long joke story, and then he tells the thing, and he's like, "There, like that. Can you do something like that for me?" And Woody's interior monologue is just, "Look at this schmuck mincing about. Like, he thinks he's funny. I don't know how much longer I can keep this smile plastered on my face." That was late night talk shows at the time.
You could imagine this is what Jerry would have going on in his mind when he met Rupert. This is schmuck. Because this guy, and Rupert Pupkin, this guy is the reason we have security around celebrities. Because some people don't understand the line. I was talking earlier, that scene where he goes back to see Shelley Hacks, the way that scene is amazing, because it's the most uncomfortable thing you've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Because he allows the scene to build. Because when she blows him off, the first thing he does is he goes, excuse me, he goes back in the waiting room and he sits down.
Mm-hmm.
And the receptionist is like, you can't be here. You need to leave. This is a waiting room. And he won't leave. So they bring out this burly kind of security guard. And he physically picks him up and says, "I'm going to explain to you our office policy," on the way out the door.
Mm-hmm.
Throws him out. Masha tells him, his friend Masha tells him, "I just saw Jerry go in the building." He marches back in and starts running around the building. And the police pull him out. Why they didn't have the guy arrested, I don't know.
I love the shot where you're in like the office part of it, and you see through an open door, and you see Rupert run by, and
Run
then the
by.
cops run by, and then he runs by again. It was incredibly cartoonish and hilarious, and something that you wouldn't really expect Scorsese to have blocked and mounted, but it was hilarious.
And the running gag is nobody can get his name right.
Right. They keep calling
Mr.
him Rupert
Pumpkin, Mr.
Pumpkin.
Puffer, Mr.
It's Pupkin.
It's Pumpkin. I think the receptionist calls him Mr. Pumpkin.
Yeah, several times.
But it's that uncomfortable thing. And you understand in this movie, really, and one thing I really gleaned from it was the idea of why some celebrities are so private.
Mm-hmm.
People like Jack Nicholson or like Michael Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
Why they don't grant interviews, why they don't talk. It's because they want their privacy.
Right, and they always
hangers on.
they'll say that, you know, oh, these people are reclusive. It's like they're not reclusive. They're trying to be normal. Just because they don't let you access their life 24/7 doesn't mean that they're reclusive. It means that they're people. It's like, you know, I've always had a problem with the celebrity obsession that specifically America has, because we have like 17 different magazines and a whole fake news store place that's trying to generate controversy out of somebody walking out the door with TMZ and all these.
Or even now, when somebody says, "Well, he touched my breast back in 1988," and suddenly, even just that accusation can close down a career.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's that.
Which I actually think, you know, I mean, I had considered trying to do a mini episode on the harassment explosion
I've been trying to figure out how to do
in
it.
Hollywood, but I actually think that it's a good thing because it's that culture has been that way for over 100 years. The casting couch has been a joke and a requirement for well over 100 years.
Yeah.
And this kind of and it extends out from the male-centric rape culture. It's not limited to harassment of women, and I think that by Harvey Weinstein going down, and then everybody subsequently, Kevin Spacey, and now Jeffrey Tambor, and a bunch of different other people, it's like, good, because these people had this power, and Louis C.K., these people had this power and they abused it. And now their power is being stripped from them appropriately because they abused it. So I actually think it's a good thing. It's going to clear out Hollywood. I mean, we were talking before, there's going to be like 6 people left. But
They're going to have an Oscars next year because there's not going to be anybody left.
There's not going to be any men left. They'll have the Oscars, but women will finally get their due because.
Right.
But you know,
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think that this movie actually really does go into that a lot. But it flips it on its head by them abducting Jerry. So instead of the powerful using their power to molest or rape or whatever, it's the powerless turning the tables on the powerful.
Well, and it's also the kidnapping thing maybe heaped a little bit on Jerry himself. Because did you notice how little security he allows himself?
Well, he thinks that walking in a crowded area makes him safe because there'd be too many witnesses for anything to happen to him. Which is a
he comes
logical
out the
thought,
door.
but
He comes out the door after the show into this massive sea of autograph hounds. Who it's like a rock concert, and they're tearing and pulling and all of this, and they're just they're just pulling and just yelling his name and all of this. And I'm thinking to myself, shouldn't you have a little bit more security than this? Because the presumption is if he's doing this 4 or 5 nights a week, why would he put himself through this 4 or 5 nights a week? Or is it just this night? They never really tell you that. But just the idea that that Rupert and his girlfriend would be allowed to get into his house, I'm thinking to myself, it's shouldn't you be a little, now, of course, you don't want to live behind a wall. Nobody wants to live behind a wall.
sure.
But it's at the same time common sense.
Well, I mean, if you think about it too, like his home number was unlisted.
Yeah.
It's probable that his address is unknown. I mean, Rupert finds out what building he lives in, but not what apartment.
Right.
But he must have tracked down somehow the location of this beach house.
Yeah.
It's probably not known that where it is. He just says he has a beach house, and you could probably do some property legwork if you really are that obsessed. The amount of work that would have had to go into Pupkin finding all this stuff out about him could have been applied to making him a multimillionaire in some business.
Yeah.
Because the level of obsession with Jerry applied to anything else would have made him a wunderkind in any kind of situation,
right.
Except this one. If he had applied this passion to actually getting out and getting into clubs and working, he would have been on the show the right way.
Right, and he would have been on the show probably before this.
Long before.
Because when you hear his monologue, when you hear his jokes, they're good.
Yeah, they're not bad.
What's interesting, the movie ends. The movie late in the film, we get a full performance.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like 30 seconds. It's like 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like you would watch if he came out on Johnny Carson, Jimmy Fallon. If he came out to do his act, we get the full thing.
Right.
So what I gleaned from it last night, listening to it, was it's good. It's very middle of the road. It sounds like every other comedian.
Right.
And as I'm listening to it, I'm also thinking the Shelley Hack character was right.
Yeah. Yes. About everything. Yeah.
It was actually right.
It shows promise, but it's not there.
It's not there. It needs to be shaped. It needs to be molded.
Mm-hmm.
But Rupert doesn't see that.
He doesn't understand it. He thinks that because he wrote it and because it's in Jerry's style, that it's automatically perfect.
Right. Right.
And it would be kind of like, when I write my reviews, right? I tend to not edit them. I just write. I hit my points and I post. I don't. It's the first draft, almost invariably. I don't think that they're perfect. I think that they're about where I need them to be to get them posted in a timely fashion. But now I'm working on, which hopefully by the time this drops, I'll be done with it, a book of critical essays on Orson Welles' pictures, and I'm doing drafts. And I'm still working my way through my first drafts, and I'm finding, even as I'm writing or after I'm done, like, I should have brought this up, I should have said this information was wrong, and I'm going back and kind of nitpicking and making notes so that when I go back to revise, I can make it cleaner and better. But I don't do that for my regular reviews. I have a formula, and when it works, and I get everything in that I want to say.
But you don't. But you don't put in your head that it's gold.
Oh no, that's true.
You know, you can always. Here's the thing. The worst thing a film critic can ever do is go back and read reviews that he wrote.
Oh God, that's torture.
5-6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I read my review once recently of The King's Speech,
Mm-hmm.
which I wrote just after I saw it in 2010,
Mm-hmm.
and the review is terrible. I mean, I
Yeah.
believe what I said, but the review is badly written,
Mm-hmm.
and I can see where I've improved. But I never wrote it. I knew that then. Every time you write something, you always know that it's a little, it needs work.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't see that.
Right.
He
No.
doesn't see that his comedy material needs work. And again,
Because he likes it.
He likes it, and his monologue is very middle of the road.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still struggling to figure out exactly. He either doesn't see or doesn't care what anybody else thinks. Apparently, doesn't.
He thinks he cares what Jerry thinks, but really, I think he would say, no, I think you're wrong. This is a good joke. This is fine the way it is. Even to him, like,
yeah.
It's this. Some would call that tenacious. Others would call that just bullheaded and unable to.
What it is.
Yeah.
I don't think Rupert's crazy. I just think he's short-sighted and he's bullheaded.
I think he definitely has some psychological issues.
Yeah.
The obsession, the
Well, yeah, because nobody does a kidnapping without.
Right, yeah. I mean, he's obviously obsessed with being Jerry Langford.
Yeah.
Which is at the time, I don't know what they would have done, but there is medication and therapy for that now.
Right.
And it's he's got this obsession, and I mean, it's obviously ruling his life. He doesn't work.
Well, he does. He there's a very slight.
Well, he goes in for like a half a minute, and then.
Yeah, there's a very slight mention of like a second when he mentions he works in communication. Of course, that could be just kind of a dodge, but he lives in his mom's basement, and it's the cliche, the guy living, the middle-aged guy, in his 40s living in his mom's basement.
Oh, he's 34.
He's 34. Well,
he says that a bunch of times.
But who knows?
Right.
But he, because people in show business lie about their age all the time.
That's true.
But it's a sad existence because apparently he has no real connections with anybody, no friendly connections with anybody.
I mean, his whole basement setup is he's got.
Oh my God.
He's got the wall is wallpapered with like a lithograph of an old time audience, a black and white
frozen
audience,
in laughter.
Frozen in laughter. He has a desk with a tape recorder, and off to the side he has his own little TV set where he sits in the middle. There's a cutout of Jerry on his left, on stage left, and on stage right is Liza Minnelli. And he would go down and just play act.
Yeah.
And he very much lives inside of his head, because when he's doing these things, when he's talking and all of this, he has this whole scenario in his mind that he's really having lunch with Jerry Langford. He's really on the show. He's really doing this stuff, and he's having these full-blown normal volume conversations. And then his mother, played by Martin Scorsese's mother,
off screen,
who really didn't know what was going on. in the whole thing. What
Apparently,
are you
because we never
doing?
see her.
What are you doing down there? And Scorsese thought it was hilarious that his mother got to berate one of the greatest actors of all time.
I'm not saying don't do it. Just turn the volume down.
I don't have a problem with you playing it. Just lower it. Lower it.
I just love how he gets irritated. One of my favorite scenes in the movie, and you have to understand, when you have, and I think we all do, you have a fantasy life that goes on inside of your own brain, where, but I love how it's organized in his head. Because he imagines getting married on the show, on Jerry Langford's show, and his old principal comes out and apologizes.
Or his old English teacher or something. Yeah.
Comes out and apologizes publicly for, like, it's just this ridiculous fantasy.
He goes, he's not my friend. He used to fail me. He's the enemy. He's like, you deserved those marks. It's like, oh.
Well, and then that scene where, and I love this scene, is when he's imagining Jerry's response to his tape.
Yeah.
Once in a lifetime, a man reaches greatness. You, my friend, have reached greatness.
You've got it.
I don't know how you do it.
You could.
I don't know how you do it.
I
don't want to know.
I don't want to know how you do it. I want to know how you do it.
How do you do it?
I'm not jealous about it. You've got it. Even if you wanted to get rid of it, you couldn't. It's stuck to you.
And then there's that scene where he's imagining, what is it? He's imagining Jerry asking him to do the show for 6 weeks.
Uh-huh.
It's impossible. It's impossible.
I'll give you the 6 weeks if I give you the 6 weeks will you leave me alone.
I can't think of the show for 6 weeks. I can't even think of my whole life for 6 weeks.
And all the while, he's in his head talking to Jerry, but then from off screen, his mother yells at him, and it cuts back to him actually being in the basement, and you see just how desperate this guy is. And I think that's a good point to pivot over to the performances.
Yeah.
Because of course Robert De Niro is remarkable. Anything he did pre Rocky and Bullwinkle and Meet the Parents is just an unparalleled masterpiece of acting. After that, he kind of started to phone stuff in.
Right. Well, he's kind of, I'm going to do this for fun.
Right. He's
David O. Russell.
He's tired. And he was good at Silver Linings Playbook.
He was very good.
That was his best performance in ages. So he gives this performance that you would not have expected from Robert De Niro, especially post Raging Bull.
Immediately, isn't it? I think this may have been immediately post.
It might have been his De Niro's next film too, because I'm not really sure, but he imbues this character with just this desperation and loneliness that you wouldn't expect him to have any kind of experience with.
And we're expecting, because it's De Niro, when you think of De Niro's early performances, before the millennium, I'll just say, you thought of Machismo. You thought of...
Yeah, in a lot of ways, because you've got what, Mean Streets, you've got The Godfather Part 2, you've got Taxi Driver, Raging Bull,
yeah,
even his being a total jerk with in New York. It's he's all just manliness and go-get-itness and just machismo.
But here it's like that's gone.
It's completely wiped away.
Now you see, he has an extreme defensive wall.
Mm-hmm.
He has Rupert character has an extreme wall, and you can see it's kind of childish. This is a man-child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because when Shelley Hack turns him down, he does this thing where you can see his jaw tighten up, and the mouth just swells into sort of almost like a pout.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens. It happens when the security guy comes to take him out.
And he's on the surface being very polite, but really he's being violently passive aggressive.
And very indignant.
Yes.
And
yeah,
what,
the way that he tries to be polite while not being polite is kind of stupendous. And the whininess that he gets when he's talking to, what's her name, Masha, the Sandra Bernhard character.
Oh, we gotta talk about her too.
Well, yeah, she's moving off of De Niro's Pupkin, which is an obviously great performance, and we'll save Jerry Lewis for last. Sandra Bernhard is remarkable in this movie. And this is like the only movie that she ever got to be remarkable in.
It is. Well, she didn't have creative control over it.
Right.
If you've ever seen her material,
Mm-hmm.
it is really. I want to use this word very carefully. It is really frustrating to an audience that would be looking for something that is what they're used to.
She's not Joan Rivers.
No, she's not Joan Rivers. She's not.
She's very. She's aggressive, but I that's usually used as a negative, and it's not a negative for her.
It is an act. If you ever seen, there's a movie, and if you really want to understand what I'm talking about here, it's called Without You, I'm Nothing, in which she does what appears to be a stand-up act with a lot of performance art,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about her life,
Hmm.
Growing up, in a Jewish family and what have you. And she does a lot of characters and a lot of things. And
So it's like a one-woman show, kind of.
It's a one-woman show.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not comedy in the traditional sense.
Right.
It's more performance art.
Mm-hmm.
But it adds the line between both.
Mm-hmm. And she's always been kind of on the edge of just really, well, I guess just on the edge. A lot of people didn't know how to take her when she was first coming around, and now people just don't want to take her.
Right.
Which is unfortunate because she is inordinately talented, and she has a lot going for her, both as a dramatic actress and as a comedian. That she's never really gotten to. She even said in the making of documentary that was filmed, I guess, for the DVD that came out in the early 2000s. She said this was the best part, but nobody knew how to take me, so this was the last great part that I had that I didn't make for myself. Because nobody wanted anything, because she was so not like the early 80s women. She wasn't. It's interesting because there was that push in the early 80s for, the career mom.
Yeah.
The businesswoman mother, like what was it? That Diane Keaton movie.
I was just about to say Diane Keaton and Baby Boom.
Yeah. And
Terry Garr and Mr. Mom or something like that.
She did not fit that mold, and so nobody knew what to do with her because she was very outside what people could process at the time.
If she were just what people are comfortable with.
Right. If she was just coming up now, she'd be a superstar. because of people like, you know, Amy Schumer getting all of her publicity and all this stuff. But they wouldn't have been who they are without Sandra Bernhard doing
Right.
this in the 80s.
What's interesting about this character is she's the offshoot of Rupert, because Rupert is aggressive in a polite way.
Right.
She's a loose cannon.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't want anything.
Yeah.
Rupert wants a career.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't seem to want anything. She's a celebrity. She's what's it Scorsese called her? A sexual terrorist.
Yeah.
You're never 100% sure exactly what she wants.
Right.
She's a loose cannon. And
she says, she talks to Jerry, and she said, you know, like, I've met other celebrities, but you're the one that I fell in love with, or whatever, this obsessive. It's a physical attraction, a sexual attraction, wanting him, whereas Rupert's is the other side of that, wanting something from him and wanting to be him.
Yeah.
To Masha just wanting to have him.
She's the type of person that I think of when I think of Mark David Chapman or John. Because that scene at the end, it's insane because, and I know it's a comedy, but they have wrapped him in tape till it looks like a body cast.
It does.
It's up to his neck. And
over
lit.
His mouth.
And my God, I mean, she looks like she spent an entire paycheck at Yankee Candle. Because there are 500 candles in this house. It must have been stifling in there. And she's lit all these candles and things like that. And this is what we think of when we think of crazy celebrity stalker.
Mm-hmm.
She's talking to him.
Because of this part, I think.
Yeah. Well, and what she's saying, you kind of have to dig under because a lot of it sounds like nonsense. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, is she wanting to have sex with him? Is she wanting to kill him? Is it what is?
Bit of both.
There are these close-ups of Jerry's face where he's not even sure what she's going to do.
Right. Yeah, he has no idea.
And it's played by Jerry Lewis in a really, because Jerry Lewis, of course, a great physical comedian, has this look on his eye like, I have no idea what is about to happen. Is this how I'm going to go out? You know,
right.
And you see it in the dark, and he does an extreme close-up. And she takes, just so casually, takes her arm and swipes everything off that table, including the candelabra, which is lit.
Right.
And it's just like, but it's juxtaposed with this thing going on with Rupert. Like,
getting on the air and everything.
Getting on the air, but it's like, is she going to do something drastic before this situation can be diffused?
Or, and the other way that I kind of looked at it, it was, I saw it as that, and also, in a way, it's both of them getting their fantasies to come true.
Yeah.
At the same time.
And
Rupert gets
way,
a little closer.
Her relationship with Rupert feels like squabbling siblings.
Yeah.
Like a brother and sister who are maybe 5-6 years old. And when you hear them the first time they're together on the street, they're nattering back and forth, like children.
What did you ever do for me? I've done all this. I gave you my spot. You wanted to be next to Jerry, and you can't put a price on that. And you know, I gave you this, and like, I didn't ask you for money, and it's like, here's a buddy. It's like she seems to have a very good job, oddly, because look at her apartment.
Look at her apartment.
I mean,
I wondered if she wasn't a daddy's girl.
Oh yeah, maybe.
You know, that's the only thing because I can't imagine anybody giving her a job. I really can't.
I
Because
can't
what's a
imagine
job
her
interview like?
focusing enough on a job taking away from her obsession. And she even says, "I'll sit here during the day and I'll be taking a bath and I'll be wondering, is Jerry taking a bath too?"
Yeah,
And
this woman needs medication,
oh yeah,
and I, I I thought it was interesting just the difference in the Rupert character and the Masha character. Everything Masha does, the whole character of Masha is irritating. Everything
yeah,
she does, everything she does,
hmm
even her name. It's
yeah.
not Marsha, it's Masha. It's just she's this irritant.
Could you just
You know,
shut up for a minute? Can I get some peace and quiet? I'm holding this gun. Could you just please shut up? I gave you all this time with the sweater. I gave you like 15 minutes with the sweater.
and by the way, I figured out that was a prop gun long before
Well,
long before Jerry did because you're looking at it and you're going, it's fake. It's like it's
well, they tell you right out before they kidnap him, and she goes, "Oh, it looks real."
oh, I missed that.
In the
Okay.
car, she says, "Oh yeah, it looks real." So they never intended real
Never intended to
harm,
hurt him.
but
Yeah.
it's still because they were so convinced that this plan would work that they wouldn't need to actually follow through on their threat. It's just empty
And
threats.
when he's sitting there and they've got the disguises on and the gun and they start talking to him about the plan, Jerry has this extremely laconic, sort of weary look or manner about him, at which you get the feeling this has happened before.
Right, yeah, exactly.
This is nothing new. He's not surprised by this at all.
At all. And he knows who they are,
Yeah. Well, first of
almost
all, I mean,
immediately.
he came to their. I mean, he came to his house.
Yeah.
So it's bizarre. It's like yeah, this is just one more step, and when I get out of here, I'll call the cops and I'll be done with these people.
hmm
And uh, what I have a little trouble with, where I struggle, is when they actually do the kidnapping, because they call the studio and they call the studio and they start telling them the plan. And the people, the producers of the show, start discussing what they're going to do.
hmm
They're actually going to give this jackass 15 minutes, 10 minutes on the show.
hmm
And this is where I wonder if this is not all in Rupert's head. Because I can't imagine a production team actually doing this. One of which is played, by the way, by Fred DeCordova, who was Johnny Carson's producer.
hmm
And he's sitting there and he's talking about, well, should we give him 15 minutes? Let's just give him his time and then he'll release Jerry. And I'm thinking, I'm wondering if that part wasn't in Jerry's and what wasn't in Rupert's head, because that just seems so far outside.
It's possible,
Reality.
but who fantasizes themselves getting arrested by the FBI?
Well, I mean, not necessarily that, but being able to manipulate powerful people.
Right. But I think that he really did get to go on. And I've always kind of taken the ending as the fantasy, I've had to frame Taxi Driver's ending as a fantasy. Um, when I saw Taxi Driver for the first time, I hated it. I was with it all the way up until the end, and then he's hailed as a hero, and I'm like, the ending undid everything. And then I saw something like, I read something. It was like, well, envision it like it's a fate, like it's not really happening. Like he's either still in the apartment complex, the brothel, and he's dying, and this is his last thought that's going through his head that he'll be hailed as a hero and he'll make it, or that he spent time in prison and this is how he feels that the outside world should have regarded him, and he's so delusional that that is now in his mind how everything played out after spending months in the hospital, you know. And I think that this is where when he gets taken away and then the newscaster starts, Rupert Pupkin, hijacked, the kidnapping king of comedy, and once that starts and it recaps, and then it says that he was sentenced to 6 years and he did 2.5, and he wrote his book in prison.
I believe that. I believe that.
I believe that too. But he wrote his book in prison. And he has a new agent, and he's going to get all this fame, and it's going to become a movie, and all this stuff that, like, you're basically watching the adaptation of what his memoir would have been.
Right.
So, is this whole thing in his head that he wrote this out, and this is this was his memoir that never happened, or is that part of it not real, and he's still in prison, or he's still a schlub, but he thought that this would be his launching pad, and this would be more indicative of the culture and the message that they were trying to go for. All of that really happened at the end, and he became famous because he kidnapped and extorted his way onto Jerry Langford's show, and now he's a big celebrity because he took an extreme action, and the next step is that somebody will do something more horrible to him,
right,
to get their shot.
It's a cycle.
Right.
He the thing about the end of the movie that made me think it was a fantasy is the announcer.
Yeah. Because
the announcer keeps repeating, Rupert Pupkin, Rupert Pupkin, Rupert Pupkin, keeps repeating that name over and over and over again. And it's because this is the kind of guy who would love to hear, who loves to hear the sound of his own name. And loves to hear, praises and all of that. That's why I wondered if it wasn't a fantasy, because it trails off. The movie ends on that note.
Right.
And it trails off. And I've always...
Just before he's about to give another performance, his second performance.
Right, and he says his name like 10 times. So that's why I was always a little confused and also a little ambivalent about the ending, because I never quite... It doesn't nail anything down. Taxi Driver nails it down a little bit more, because he ends up in the hospital and he's hailed a hero because he rescued this young girl, and the only people that got hurt were drug dealers and pimps and what have you. I believe that may have been the reality. Here, I don't know. Here, I have no idea. I don't know which, and I tend to struggle sometimes to figure out in this film what's real and what's really in his head. Now, some of it is obvious, like the conversations he has with Jerry.
Right.
Some of it I wonder. Now, the kidnapping, I believe, was real, because nobody would fantasize a kidnapping plot this clumsy.
Right. He even drops the gun getting out of the car.
He drops the gun getting out of the car. He keeps fumbling with a cue card. And
yeah.
Jerry's sitting there, and he's reading the cue cards, and he has to stop, and he has to tell his kidnapper, "You've got the card upside down."
Okay, next card, please.
The card, there's nothing on the card.
Yeah, you've got a blank card.
He's got the phone in his hand.
It's like, I'm reading from cue cards. I just, this hang on a minute.
I guarantee you, the way this kidnapping plays out, it's like he and Masha worked this out in theory, but didn't quite tighten it down to logic. Because
So
it's the clumsiest kidnapping you've ever seen.
I think from that we need to talk about Jerry Lewis.
Absolutely. Who we just lost this year.
Yes. Well, last year when this drops.
Yeah.
This is his greatest performance as an actor. And I like I like Jerry Lewis's stuff to a point. The Bellboy is funny. The Nutty Professor is hilarious. But there were when he was with Dean Martin, he was cloying and annoying. And some of those roles, especially when he would lapse into his horribly offensive Chinese man.
God, he was doing that in the 80s.
Yeah, he was. He never gave that up because he got famous. That was one of his famous things, and it's just appalling. I do think that he was often judged too harshly.
Yeah.
But by the same token, there was some stuff that he did that was just brutally terrible.
Yeah.
But this is his finest performance, unless we ever get to see, now that he's passed, the day the clown cried.
I want to see it, but at the same time, I don't want to see it.
Well, there's a rumor that he would always carry around a briefcase with a VHS copy of the only cut in existence of it for
For
years.
those who don't know, you want to briefly describe what the Day the Clown Cried is?
The Day the Clown Cried is Jerry Lewis's magnum opus. I don't know what it's supposed to be about, but it was the last movie that he directed, and no one ever saw a cut of it.
Well,
he closely guarded it.
Claim to have seen it. Harry
Yes.
Shearer claims to have seen it. There's an interview on YouTube that he did on the Howard Stern show, where he talks about his experience having seen it sometime in, I believe, the 90s or something. What the movie essentially is about, he plays a circus clown who is during Nazi Germany, and he's not Jewish. The character is not Jewish.
All right.
He is arrested for
Now I remember.
offending. He's arrested for offending some high officials in the Nazi Party,
Mm-hmm.
and he is thrown in a concentration camp. And if you've never heard this, brace yourself, because this is amazing. The character's job is to entertain little Jewish children in the concentration camp, and lead them into the gas chamber. You hear that silence? Yeah.
Wow.
That's the plot of this movie. It was half done. Jerry was putting it together because he wanted to start a chain of movie theaters that would show family pictures. And this is the film he was going to start with.
Jesus Christ.
The movie he was going to start with.
Family movie. Okay.
Family pictures.
I knew. I always understood that there was a final cut done. Like, he finished filming it, he finished editing it, but either nobody or a select few people had ever seen it. He was holding on to it because he didn't want it to be savaged by critics, because he actually thought that it was quite a monumental work.
Right.
But hearing that, it sounds like the absolute. It sounds like if Life is Beautiful went a really wrong direction. Like,
There is an interview. I'm not kidding you. There's an interview on YouTube where he is addressing. He's on stage during an interview, and somebody asks him about it. His first words are, "Go fuck yourself." And he tries to explain it. He says, it didn't work. It could have been beautiful.
Right.
But that's really the only time he ever really mentions it. And I don't know if we'll ever see it. Well, I don't. There's all kinds of. It's a legend.
Mm-hmm.
It's a legend. It kind of floats around, and
I don't
nobody
know
ever.
if I would ever want to see it because it would take away from its legendary status. I hope that they don't. I hope that his estate doesn't decide to release
It's like
it.
learning. It's like learning what the Marfalites are. It's like you don't want to know. You just want to be. You just want to enjoy the mystery.
Right.
Jerry Lewis, for me, has always been a pain in the butt. Starting in childhood, because when I was in grade school, all I heard, are you one of Jerry's kids? This first name caused me
Oh man.
much distress, as did my initials, because my initials are JR. And I came up during the whole Who Shot JR thing.
Yeah, Dynasty thing. Yeah.
The Dallas.
Dallas. Sorry.
And not that it matters, they're all the same.
Yeah.
But Jerry Lewis, to me, was always I was kind of a little bit irritating. Because sometimes you could see it, sometimes you could see great work, but personally I couldn't stand him because he was so self-involved and such an egomaniac.
If
and
you've ever
such a-
listened to the old Martin and Lewis radio program,
Or watch him on the Colgate Comedy Hour.
right. He was really, really annoying. But in the movies, like My Friend Irma, which I think was his first picture with Dean Martin, My Friend Irma, and then there was a sequel. He was decent. He was good. He was still the and once he started to drop that, he started to become tolerable.
Yeah.
Like I started to be able to watch some of his films back when I was in early part of college, when AMC was still American Movie Classics and it still actually showed movies without commercials.
Before it was the Walking Dead network.
Right. So, before they started interrupting everything with commercials and just being an all-around... They're a better network now that they're making their own stuff and it's high-quality stuff, but they're still not...
They've become every other basic cable channel.
Yeah. So back then, it was like TCM, and it had a lot of selection, too. I think after Ted Turner bought, like, all the movies, that's when they started to go under, because they didn't have the rights anymore, so they had to sell commercial time and break stuff up and only run, like, the Godfather trilogy for, like, 6 years. And but I used to watch. They would have Jerry Lewis. They would do, I think every weekend, they would do 2 or 3 Jerry Lewis movies. So I started watching some of them, and they're not horrible. The ones that he directed were a little bit better than the ones that he just acted in. But The Nutty Professor was probably his best work as a director.
Yeah, because the Buddy Love character was basically Dean Martin.
It was.
The best to me, and I'm going to post a link to this, when Jerry Lewis died in August, past August, I had trouble writing an obituary. I eventually did, but I had a little struggle writing an obituary. So I posted on Facebook a little 5-minute scene from The Errand Boy, which I think is brilliant. It's a pantomime in which he comes into an empty boardroom, and he sits down, and he starts to play with this cigar that he finds. He lights it up. And while the band is playing, doing this pantomime of a boss, a big important boss, giving a meeting. I cannot describe it, but I'll say it's brilliant. Again, I'll post a link because you need to see this. It is the pinnacle of what Jerry Lewis could do, because it's all done to music. And he's yelling at the imaginary functionaries and all of this kind of stuff. But it's all done to this big brassy band music. That's the brilliance of what Jerry Lewis could do. The problem is, again, and we talked about, when we talked about The Godfather, we talked about Brando being self-destructive. Brando was nothing compared to Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis,
no.
The king of self-destructive.
Mm-hmm.
And his career seemed to go in these weird directions. I'm not going to make any friends saying this. I never could stand the telephone. I understand the cost.
Yeah.
And by the way, they never cured it.
No.
They never cured it. But, that $1 more, just one more phone call. But it was a bizarre display. It was a circus. Because he would come out and he would do these terrible songs. You could tell he didn't want to be there. Of course, I came in a little later, but it was a weird juxtaposition. You had a woman on the telethon. She had two sons who were in rough shape because they both had muscular dystrophy, and they're telling their story and how much they need help, and they whisk this woman off stage, and now Rip Taylor.
Right.
It was just like, what?
Yeah,
it was weird.
It was always very disjointed, and
yeah.
And I kind of agree. Like, we always watched it. It was Memorial Day, right?
Yeah, Memorial Day weekend.
So
Labor Day weekend.
Labor Day weekend. So I remember watching it with my friend. We would go over to usually my great aunt's house and have lunch, and it would be on, and you could tell where it was by how tied his tie was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was never really a huge fan of it either. It was just something that was on.
And you could see on the thing, Jerry had this very transparent skin where you could see him sweating. And he had this oily hair, and he just looked wet. And it's like, it was just gross. It was sorry. It's just a gross presentation.
It's like, Jerry, can you take 10 minutes and during an act and take a shower and come back? And
I'm sure you have makeup people that can help you with that.
Well, he wanted the look of being disheveled after being on television for 24 hours.
And he wasn't on television for 24 hours.
No, he wasn't. I think that's why I think the whole of it was like a routine. I think that they made him up to look like he was getting more and more haggard as it went on.
Well, and then you come back down to this, which is the King of Comedy, which I think this is him. Really. I like this performance. Because Jerry is professional.
Right.
Jerry Langford is professional. How in the world this man ever got a talk show, I don't know, because when you listen to the material, I'm thinking, the material that we see, even in that deleted scene, is kind of terrible. The jokes are just not funny. Except maybe one where he says, who here's from New Jersey? And everyone's like, hey! He's like, who cares?
Yeah.
Those little jokes. And that joke that he tells, the other deleted scene, the one where he meets the two people on the street, and the woman says, I get undressed every night in front of you. And
he doesn't mind. He goes, yeah, I can't get anything started with her until after your show. He goes, well, if you're quick about it, you could get it done during the commercials.
See, that's funny. That's funny. But, you wonder how in the world he ever got a talk show. And you understand, and you kind of understand, because that's pretty much how his talk show went. When he had a talk show, it was like, when he came out, he did the same kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't funny. And it didn't work. Because it never seemed prepared. And he didn't have the kind of Carson had a very loose,
Mm-hmm.
natural way with his monologues and with his guests. Jerry was always Jerry.
Right.
My name is up there. I'm going to be out there, and I'm going to be. People want to see me. No, people don't want to see you. They want to be entertained. You have to do the work.
Yeah.
And Carson had this way of diffusing jokes that didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
He broke the cardinal sin of comedy, which is never admit that the joke didn't work.
Like he would tell it, nobody would laugh, and he goes, "Ooh, I wasn't sure about that one at the start." Like,
Or he'd pull down the microphone, attention, Kmart choppers. You know, and he'd do these weird things. Or he'd pull out a squirt gun. He knew how to diffuse.
mm-hmm.
Well, I take that back. His writers knew how to diffuse a bad joke. Because Carson had this way of dealing with of letting his writers do the work. When Carson would do like the kids' letters to Santa Claus,
Yeah.
the writers wrote those.
Mm-hmm.
So it's supposed to sound like kids, but it's actually the writers writing them. And the writers will write the savers. But Carson knew how to use that. Jerry didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry just figured that people want to see me. And a lot of that comes out in his performance.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's very stiff on stage. What will we see? Why that crowd is out there? I was going to say I don't know why that crowd is out there, but actually I do. It's because it's him.
Right. That's exactly it. He got
the
the show. He was probably already known. He got the show. The show was good in its day.
Yeah.
And as it went on, the material got more and more outdated, but he didn't change it because people still showed up. People still laughed, and people still recognized him and talked to him on the street because he was on television. The show had become an institution, so it didn't matter if it was any good or not.
Yeah. What people miss in a show like that is the idea that the best stuff comes from the unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the prepared stuff, because if you listen to a Johnny L. Carson monologue, generally it's not very funny.
Yeah, no.
Really not. It was the off-the-cuff stuff that we remembered. You know, it's the little things, the
golf swing, or
or something like that, or just something, an animal would crap all over him or something like that. Things that were not prepared were the reason people were watching that show.
Yeah.
And that's why I personally never really found Letterman all that funny. Because Letterman would dig at a joke, and he would repeat the same jokes over and over again when he didn't get the laugh that he wanted, but would never admit that the joke didn't work.
I always thought I liked Letterman after his surgery. Post triple bypass, he was magnificent. And I always kind of liked that when he would go, and this, like he reiterated that he knew it was bad by bringing it back up, which was then funny because they knew that the joke didn't work, and he was just calling attention to the fact that he told a terrible joke.
Yeah.
So it was his way of, admitting that it was bad by continuing to call back to it.
Yeah.
So.
But Carson knew how to bring the joke down.
Right.
With a comment. And I always found Letterman's approach irritating because it's like the joke didn't work, let it go, or diffuse it with dialogue, and that always bothered me. One joke I loved that Letterman had was, and this was one of those running gags that he would do, was like, when Anna Nicole Smith married that 90-year-old man, Letterman's response was, I think I speak for everyone when I say, dude. Because they were talking about, yes, they did consummate the marriage. But I honestly moved away from a lot of those kinds of shows because it was the same thing over and over again. And generally, the only time I ever watched one was when it was a guest that I was really, really interested in. Like, for example, when Carson would have Siskel and Ebert on.
Mm-hmm.
Or Leno had Siskel and Ebert on because Leno was a movie fan.
Mm-hmm.
And Leonard, when Johnny Carson would have Siskel and Ebert on, and there was always this inevitable moment when the two of them would start squabbling about something.
Right, but he would always egg that on because that's
I mean,
what he knew people wanted to see.
He would start. The two of them would start squabbling about something and completely forget Johnny was even there. And Johnny's just sitting at the desk, just relaxing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't even watch those shows anymore. The Jimmy Fallon or who's running Late Show now? Who got?
Stephen Colbert.
Yeah.
And Conan O'Brien and James.
Conan I'll watch
Corden.
a little bit. It depends on the cast. But some people are suited for it. Some people are not. Carson was suited for it.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Lewis was not.
No. Pat Sajak was not.
Pat Sajak. Oh, and neither was Chevy. Well, neither was Chevy Chase. And
No.
but again, coming back to the movie, how in the world he ever got a show, I don't know. Or maybe that was just a bad episode. But it's not the point. The point is he's famous. People know who he is. He's around, and getting close to him is getting close to this celebrity thing.
Right. It's touching the star.
Touching the star, yeah.
And just Lewis was so nuanced in his take on this and his performance here that it just, I mean, you're right. You feel like this is really him because he always had that reputation of being a jerk in real life.
But he's not a jerk in this movie.
He gets to be there at some points, but it's all justifiable.
Yeah, it's all justifiable.
It's all pushed.
I mean,
he pushes
the guy
him in
showed
that
up
direction.
at his house. The guy showed up at his house.
Right. Well, but then if you also see, like, he's walking through the streets and this woman is like, "Are you Jerry Langford? Can you say something to my nephew on the phone? 'Cause she's on a payphone." And he goes, I'm late. I can't." And she goes, "You should only get cancer."
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah. Oh, I want to ask you this though. I'm sure you've met celebrities, obviously. How do you approach a celebrity?
I've never met a celebrity.
Really?
Yeah.
I have a tendency when I meet someone who is famous to talk to them basically the exact same way I'm talking to you.
Well, that would be the way that I would approach it too, because they're tired of always having this sycophantic.
Right.
You know, I mean, like if I ever got to meet like somebody like Bob Dylan, I probably wouldn't even ask him for his autograph. I just asked to shake his hand and say that how much his music has meant to me, and I'd thank you very much and walk away. You know, it's
sometimes this kind of thing, because I've never been able to understand this thing that happens at the beginning of the movie when they're sitting in the when they're outside and they're all screaming his name and grabbing for him and all of this, and the women are coming up and throwing themselves at him. I never understood people like that.
Yeah, no, the groupie mentality, like
he's just a person.
Right. Yeah.
Flesh and blood and bones.
He just happens to be on your television. It's like that's where things always got creepy for me. It's like people seem to think that because they watch these people in movies or on television that they know them, and that it's okay to try to find out everything about their lives because, well, we know them. They're in the public eye. We know them. We've spent all this time with them. It's like you don't know. You know the characters that they're portraying.
Right.
And nobody, even on talk shows, they're playing a character. They're not really themselves. They are on. When they're off.
Carson was not the same person on stage as he was.
No, absolutely not.
The real visual in this film that I think really sticks with me is right there at the beginning, because they're fighting to get in Jerry's limo.
Mm-hmm.
And
Masha gets in.
Masha gets in, and Rupert slams the door shut.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a freeze frame that goes on while we're doing the opening credits.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2.5 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
And we hear this very appropriate song. It's Ray Charles, Come Rain or Come Shine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's very, very appropriate. And by the way, this is the song that Masha sings to Jerry at the end of the movie.
Right.
But if you listen to the lyrics, it's very, very fitting to this movie. It's not just a song that's put in. But they freeze frame, and her hands are on the glass.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see Rupert outside. You can see Jerry. But and someone at that moment has set off a flashbulb. He's taken a picture.
Mm-hmm.
I thought of a television screen.
Yeah. Me too.
Of someone trying to get to that side.
Mm-hmm.
I also thought of Poltergeist.
Mm-hmm.
She's got the glass and she's got her hands up.
Of course you thought of Poltergeist.
Of course I thought of Poltergeist. Because this is another movie. This is the third movie in a row. This is the third movie we've talked about where we brought this up that has a negative outlook on television.
Yeah.
Because we talked about Poltergeist and we talked about The Shining,
Mm-hmm.
and now this.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very negative look at the negative influences of television.
Which will ultimately culminate when we talk about network at some point.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be on that's on my list of things that I desperately want to talk about.
Yeah. But that shot right there at the beginning, that tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
Trying desperately to get to the other side of the glass.
Right. Right.
And trying to break into that.
And that's what this is. It's not trying to realistically approach this situation. It's trying to jump into the television and become a character that's supposed to be there.
Yeah.
It's completely. I'm trying to think of what the word that it would be. It's a fantastical thought process.
Yeah.
That just has no basis in reality, but they don't know that. And so yeah, it's the movie is really powerful, but it's also hysterically funny in an awkward sort of a way. Kind of like how Taxi Driver is. Like, I didn't realize how funny Taxi Driver was until I saw it in the theater with a full audience.
Oh God, that scene where he takes the porn theater.
So I mean, this really follows off of that, and Scorsese actually kind of felt like this is a spiritual sequel to Taxi Driver. The characters are very similar.
I can see that. Because Travis Bickle and Rupert Pupkin are, I won't say the same, but very similar.
Right.
In
one of them actually acts out in real murderous violence, and the other is passive-aggressive and takes one step towards it, but then takes a steps back.
Well, I don't know, because Rupert does have his own violent tendencies.
Yes. Because
he's not strong-arming his way into the business with, by shooting the place up.
Right.
He's strong-arming it by force of will.
Right.
By his stubbornness.
Mm-hmm.
Really, all of that. And as I always say about this character, he's a guy who just doesn't get it.
Yeah, like at any point, anyway.
He doesn't see the doors. He doesn't see the borders, the lines that you don't cross.
Right.
And that's terrifying.
Yeah, it is. It is
terrifying pathology.
Yeah, and the most terrifying aspect of that is that is something that happens.
Yes.
People do become this obsessed with celebrities, and it's...
That's why celebrities have security.
Right.
because of people like this.
So, I think that kind of wraps up our talk on the King of Comedy. What recommendations would you have for our listeners to go off of this one?
I want to recommend absolutely, positively, you need to see a marvelous documentary series, A Journey with Martin Scorsese through American movies,
Ooh, yeah, that is a good one.
where it is a bare bones conversation style in which he sits down, he's in a canvas chair with a black background, and he tells you what movies have meant to him,
Mm-hmm.
what directors meant to him, what actors, what genres, all of these things from childhood on up until the point where he started making films.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the most, we love filmmakers who love films.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this man loves films.
Yes.
It's a long documentary, but it's fascinating. It's endlessly fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about westerns. He talks about musicals. He talks about all these different genres that
And
influence him.
it's just great to listen to him talk, because
Yeah.
I could listen to him talk for days.
Yeah.
Um.
But that's that's I would recommend that every time we ever do a Scorsese film, I'm probably going to bring that up because we're going to talk about another Scorsese film in a couple of weeks.
Yes. Yes, we are.
We're going to talk about The Last Temptation of Christ
Mm-hmm.
around Easter.
Yay.
So yeah, check that one out because it
Yeah,
really is. Also,
it is
you can
good.
find it. Also, if you can find it, it used to be streamed on YouTube, but it's not anymore. Is a wonderful interview called Scorsese on Scorsese.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They do this series every once in a while. They also did Spielberg on Spielberg
Mm-hmm.
and Cronenberg on Cronenberg, which they sit down and they let the director talk, and
Right.
they go through all of his films one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, it used to be on YouTube. I can't find it again, but I'm sure it's out there somewhere. What do you got?
To piggyback off of your his voyage through American cinema, there's another one that he directed called My Voyage Through Italian Cinema, or My Voyage to Italy, that goes through the Italian stuff that he was watching on television when he was little growing up, because his family spoke Italian, and so he would see these Italian films, and he tracks Italian cinema up through from when he was a little kid all the way up through some of the great masters up until he started directing films and a little bit after. Same basic principle, just only with Italian films. I don't know if you've ever gotten to see that one.
I haven't.
But that one, it's just as it's another 3.5 or 4 hours long, because Martin Scorsese apparently cannot make a short documentary.
No. Unless somebody else, unless it's like Scorsese on Scorsese, where somebody else is in charge, he can't.
Right. Because he also, he also did the No Direction Home on Bob Dylan. He did Living in a Material World on George Harrison, both of which are 3.5 to 4 hours long.
Yeah.
Shine a Light is probably his shortest documentary. Shine a Light and The Last Waltz, because they're just the length of concerts.
Right.
But I would recommend that highly. And the celebrity, I would recommend Network. Even we are going to be talking about that at some point, because that also this is an extension of that sensationalism for ratings and for the sake of.
And also, if you want a film of that vein, if you want a double feature, that Network goes well, I think, with Quiz Show.
Yeah, it does.
Quiz Show. Because it's another story about easy money, instant celebrity, and instant fame.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Dealing with Quiz Show scandal.
Right. Yeah, and that's an excellent movie too.
Well, next week.
Yes, next week. Go ahead.
Next week, we're having a special show, because next week is the announcement of the Academy Award nominations. And in that, we are going to spend some time asking a very pointed question. does Oscar matter?
Yes. And
we're going to answer this question.
We're going to answer it. We're going to talk about it. And it's actually going to drop the day before the nominations for the 2017 year season, so it'll drop the third week of January.
Should be January 22nd.
Right. 2018, so we will not be commenting on what was or was not nominated. That will not be the purpose of it. We are going to be discussing Oscar in general, because the both of us kind of love the show and the award itself. So we'll be talking about that. What do we have coming up after that?
After that is my pick. We are going to be talking about a great film called The Sweet Smell of Success.
I love that movie so much.
And then after that is going to be a nice, big, gigantic tribute to Francois Truffaut.
Because it will be dropping the day before his and my birthday. I share a birthday with Truffaut, so we're going to be. I'll probably.
I share a birthday with Joe McCarthy. How's that for being born under a bad sign?
Hey, Truffaut is the one I admit to. Truffaut and Bob Marley are the ones I admit to. I'm also born on Reagan's birthday, so Ronald Reagan's birthday. So Francois Truffaut and I share a birthday.
Yeah. So at least I got Prince Charles to fall back on.
Oh, hey, yeah. So we'll be discussing at least a handful of his pictures, and I'm basically introducing Truffaut as a filmmaker to Jerry because he just hasn't ever gotten around to him.
I've seen one film that he's ever directed, and I loved it. And we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. But next week is Oscar, then Sweet Smell of Success, and then Truffaut.
Yeah. So we thank you very much for sticking with us and for listening all the way through this and all of our other episodes. We appreciate your listenership. You can find my writings, Doug Heller, at talkmovietome.com. I'm the film critic and historian there. You can find Jerry's writings at Armchair Oscars, Armchair Critic, and overthinkingoscars.wordpress.com.
Armchair Cinema.
Armchair Cinema. I always do that. You'd think by now I would stop doing that.
He did that before. Every time I listen to the episode, I'm like,
they're not going to be able to find me.
They're going to be able to find me.
ArmchairCinema.com, ArmchairOscars.com, and OverthinkingOscars.com. .wordpress.com, sorry. You can find all of our past episodes at www.thepodbaydoorspodcast.wordpress.com, which sounds much better when you do it like William Shatner. That about wraps it up for us. Again, thank you very much. Give us your likes, give us your comments, anything that you would want to hear us talk about. We would very much appreciate that. Thanks once again, and the pod bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.
I'm gonna love you like no one's loved you, come rain or come shine. High as a mountain, deep as a river, come rain or come shine. I guess when you met me, it was just one of those things. But don't ever bet me, 'cause I'm gonna be true. Well, if you let me. me like nobody's loved me. Come rain or come shine. Happy together, unhappy together.